Hi guys, it's Shadow. Uploading high-quality audiobooks for you, it's very time-consuming and hard-working process. So please support me so I can keep uploading for you. This is how. You can donate directly through my PayPal or Ko-fi. You will find links in the description. Or you can join our Telegram channel where you will find all paid audiobooks that we provide. Also, you can make requests and you will find proof of payments from our plus 200 paid members. If you can't support me financially, just like and subscribe our videos. Thank you guys, your support means a lot. And as always, enjoy Shadow. Chapter 131. The Great Warrior from the East. Chapter 131. The Great Warrior from the East. There was a mountainside village situated on the eastern side of the Griffin Kingdom. To reach the Marias Great Forest, people had to pass through this village. Therefore, the village engaged in businesses that primarily catered to tourists, travelers, and hunters. Most of the restaurants were taverns, and the taller ones could be used as inns for accommodation. Due to the favorable perception of the Griffin Kingdom among citizens of other countries, Marias Great Forest was frequently visited by many travelers. While it attracted outsiders regularly, it was especially teeming with many animals and demonic monsters, practically making it a paradise for hunters. Another day began in the mountainside village. People greeted each other with smiles, welcomed guests, and prepared breakfast. With its generous hospitality and fair prices, the village quickly became the welcoming face of the Griffin Kingdom for travelers who were crossing into the Marias Great Forest. This led to the villagers taking pride in it. A good influence and mindset had spread among them. It was a truly special place. Thud, 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 thud. Along with the sound of morning roosters crowing in the village, vibrations that awakened the ground also arrived. Are there many travelers arriving? Beyond the Marias Great Forest lay the once called Cursed Land, the Sahar Desert, and beyond that was the German Kingdom. People turned their attention toward the forest entrance, wondering if it was a group of travelers from the German Kingdom or perhaps an envoy. To welcome the arriving group of guests, the villagers began waiting for them at the entrance. Shortly after, a massive crowd emerged from the shadows of the forest. They were all topless with their bodies covered in strange tattoos. Instead of horses, they rode atop a demonic monster that had horns, grotesque teeth, and wings, resembling dragons called lizard. Whoosh! The sound of splitting wind echoed. Stab. Huh? The villager couldn't help but gasp after witnessing a friend next to him being struck in the head by an arrow, falling suddenly. Soon, another arrow flew and pierced the villager's throat, making him collapse to the ground. It's the tribal people. What the hell? Why are they suddenly attacking us? They're insane. The Marias tribe has gone mad. The indigenous people living in the Marias Great Forest, the Marias tribe, had swiftly invaded the mountainside village, destroying everything. Only livestock, which were valuable for their food rations, remained. Everyone else lay on the ground, regardless of age or gender, spilling blood. Leading them at the front was a great warrior mounted on a black lizard. With copper skin and a massive physique, the great warrior, having shaved off all his hair to avoid showing any weakness in battle, raised a spear high towards the sky. Today, Marias' wrath shall be unleashed. Their rugged muscles wriggled as if it were alive, and the tip of their spear was filled with fierce enmity towards Griffin Kingdom. Today, we will start to resolve the grudge the chieftain and our comrades, Sedema held. Although it was hard to find out if his booming voice contained mana, it held a strange power and echoed throughout the entire village. I, Voxer, the great warrior of Marias, am accompanied by the spirits of our ancestors and the guardian deity, Horua. As he spoke, crimson wings extended from his back. It was the fiery wings of Horua, the guardian deity who lived in the Marias Great Forest, similar to the guardian deity in the Norsweden mountain range, Mountain Lord. We shall unleash our wrath upon Griffin, who dare to call themselves noble. Just 2 hours. In just 2 hours, they had completely razed one village to the ground before immediately taking the reins to head for the next village. The first-year students were out for practical training, and I had returned to my usual routine. Of course, it only seemed ordinary on the surface, but it was a bit different in reality. I was doing quite a lot of preparation. It's not like someone's on your ass. Why are you so busy? Findene, who was watching me from the side, couldn't help but ask. She wondered why I was so preoccupied. The dark spiritualist beside me also nodded in agreement. However, I had no choice but to be busy. I granted Arya Rias her freedom. She was no longer the hero who had to save this continent. Therefore, I now had to make plans on how to save the continent without Arya. Dealing with Dante was especially quite tricky. That was the part that caused me to fail in the first round. I could never reach the ending if I killed Dante's leader. If he died, the boundary between life and death would be blurred, leading to the downfall of the continent. However, it also went against my principles to follow Dante's means. I needed to find a solution for this problem. And after solving it, I had to consider what would come next. Luckily, we have plenty of battle power and time on our side. Besides Findine and the Dark Spiritualist as my top two, I could also employ Erica and the Saintess. Additionally, thanks to my position as the Soul Whisperer, I could receive assistance from the palace. In fact, we had an abundance of battle power, and it was just the beginning of the second semester of the first year. There wasn't any need to rush, but I never know what will happen. Through my activities, I had gained quite a bit of influence in many directions. From interfering with Dante to suppressing the nobles. Now, my experience from playing Retry was merely knowledge to give me some advice. It could no longer predict the future. Shenng. Professor Felpetra entered the lab, groaning as she struggled to carry a large box with both hands. Owen rushed to help her. What's in it? Professor Fel knew that I had recently started receiving research materials that I requested from the academy, so she probably thought it might be those. Unfortunately, this time, the item that arrived wasn't something I would be using to help with my research. Findine, open it. Huh? Me? Although the box was huge, what was inside wasn't that heavy. The items inside were valuable, therefore, the box had undergone thorough secure packaging. Findine made a loud noise as she tore open the box. She ignored the safety instructions as she simply smashed through it with her hands. Inside was a round bracelet that emitted a sinister energy with a bloody hue. Whoa, what is that? So scary. Professor Fel and Owen immediately stepped back, but Findine looked at me dumbfoundedly before trying to pass it to me. What's this bracelet? Put it on, it is yours. Huh? With a surprised gaze, Findine looked alternately between me and the bracelet. After wearing an uncharacteristically foolish expression for a while, she cautiously retracted her extended hand and eventually put it on her right wrist. Click. Immediately after the sound, she felt a strange sensation, causing her eyes to tremble slightly. Sensing something, she infused mana into her hand. The bracelet soon released a red light, enveloping Findine's hand like a glove. What is this? It is an item called the Hand of Hemomancy. If you inject blood into it while in use, you will gradually feel your health increase. You're really giving this to me? Yes, it is a fitting item for you. It was important for Findine to stall for time, as she was the type who grew stronger the longer the battle dragged on. In gaming terms, she needed a lifesteal item. In that sense, the Hand of Hemomancy, which absorbed the opponent's blood and replenished the user's HP, was a perfect fit for Findine. Moreover, it was also an item that Findine originally owned in the game. The Findine drop item. It was an item with a certain probability that would drop when players defeated her. Besides that, Findine also had other items like her primary weapons, the Axe of Pangu and the landing machine, which turned her into a true chapter boss in the game. In the case of Axe of Pangu, Iluania found information that allowed me to discover that the item would soon be exchanged in one of the auction houses. However, since the landing machine was a product of the Clark Republic, I couldn't obtain it for her right away. I thought you were giving me something good, but you just gave this to me so I could work harder, huh? I simply nodded to affirm Findine's accusation, noting her pouting expression as she spoke. If there is a chance, you should try it out. It's too boring here. I have no one to beat up. When Findine clenched her fist, the red gloves surrounding her hand transformed back into a bracelet. Well, despite her words, seeing her repeatedly glancing at her wrist, Findine seemed to quite like the bracelet. Come to think of it, wasn't this the second gift I had given to Findine? The first were the cigarettes I gave her when she returned from the Clark Republic. Now that I thought about it, it seemed like she only smoked other cigarettes, not the ones I had given her. Have you finished smoking all of the cigarettes I gave you? I casually asked Findine as I was suddenly curious. She then stuck her hand deep into her maid uniform front pocket, taking out a familiar box. Neatly laid inside were the 10 cigarettes I had given her. You said they're precious. Last time, I saw her sniffing it, but she hadn't smoked any of them? Even so, it was somewhat surprising that she hadn't even lit a single one. Was it because of that? I silently stared at Findine, and she, too, sat there and blankly stared back at me. We had nothing to say between us. It was just a moment of both of us looking at each other without any thoughts. Creak. The door opened and Erica Bright entered the lab. I casually shifted my gaze from Findine to Erica. She spoke with quite an urgent expression. There is a call coming from the royal palace. From His Majesty. Since they contacted you through the communication crystal in the dean's office, you should hurry there. It was the first call I had received since I returned to the academy. I wondered if there was something he wanted me to do, and I also felt that the timing was good. Maybe I could use this as an excuse to procure some useful items from the royal treasury. However, the situation was bigger than I thought. The tribal people from the eastern Marias Great Forest have crossed the country border, and they are massacring citizens. The tribal people? After leaving the others behind, Erica and I exited the laboratory to go to the dean's office. In the meantime, Erica quickly filled me in on the information she knew. They're using the pretext of revenge for Chieftain Cattler and the residents of Sedima. Freeze. I halted my steps momentarily. Erica also stopped a few steps ahead, turning to look at me. Are they related to Sedima's residents? It was new information to me. The residents from Sedima had already settled their grievances, finally receiving their eternal rest. I'm not sure about that, but I heard that's why the Zironia household, which is associated with the Sedima villagers, set out to subjugate them, but they were nearly wiped out. Sigh. Gideon, who wasn't at the academy currently, was probably involved in that mission. I wasn't interested in their retribution, but it was quite disturbing to know that those tribal people started to massacre others under the guise of seeking justice for the residents of Sedima. We should go for now. I resumed my steps towards the Dean's. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 132. Revelation. Chapter 132. Revelation. The Dean was standing politely while wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief when I entered his office. Right now, I was not here as a professor under the Dean, but as the one and only dark mage of the Griffin Kingdom. I was here as the sole whisperer Deus Verdi. Have you arrived? The expression of His Majesty, as reflected in the communication crystal on the desk, was grim. It did not resemble the face of the man who had firmly subdued the nobles and was now standing atop a power structure akin to absolute monarchy. The sole whisperer Deus Verdi greets your majesty. I attempted to get down on one knee, as dictated by royal etiquette, to greet him, but Orpheus shook his hand to stop me. We're already past that, aren't we? You also know that I am not particularly fond of such formalities. Upon hearing that, I didn't insist and slowly stood back up. The Dean and Erica seemed quite shocked by His Majesty's reaction, but I paid no heed to them. I have briefly heard about the situation on my way here. The tribe from the Marias Great Forest on the eastern side have raided the kingdom. It's a massacre. On top of that, it's on a grand scale. No one is left alive in their wake. They killed people and consumed the animals. They were like a swarm of locusts solely focused on just two things. I heard their purpose is to avenge Chieftain Cattler and the residents of Sedima. It has been years since the chieftain was executed. Hasn't it? I believe it occurred during my father's reign. I knew about the chieftain because he was one of the souls I had forcefully awakened using Lemigitin during the fight against Mage Tribunal Judge Tyron at the execution ground. I clearly remembered his power from the bolt of lightning he unleashed. The grudge of the residents of Sedima. I don't know the details, but I heard that you've already resolved it. You also asked the Zironia household to take responsibility and instructed them to erect a memorial monument. I can assure you that those people would never condone someone committing a massacre in their name. They were pure souls who were willing to forgive the Griffin Kingdom and even the Zironia household, which brutally murdered them. The fact that the Marias tribe were committing massacres under the name of Sedima made me feel extremely uncomfortable. Yes, something felt off, so I conducted an investigation. The names of some rather troublesome houses emerged in the report. King Orpheus gritted his teeth. Romerzan, Heroin, and Bowman. I received intelligence reports that a large number of the heads of the households that are still rebelling against me have gone over to the Marias Great Forest. Not only are they colluding with the German kingdom, but are also preparing for acts of treason. They're absolutely insane. They fled and recruited the Marias tribe because they were in danger of being exposed. It felt like a scheme of pure malice, but in that case, I couldn't help but have doubts. I don't think the Marias tribe would follow them just by hearing a few words. Yes, those are my thoughts as well. The nobles who defected may have done something, but that alone wouldn't have made it easy for the tribes of the Marias Great Forest to invade a powerful nation like Griffin. That's why I first sent some soldiers there, and to show the royal family's determination to thoroughly protect our subjects. I also dispatched some members of the Royal Knight. It was a rather aggressive response, but it conveyed the strong commitment to protect and keep their citizens safe. That response was akin to wielding the mightiest sword, which defended the royal family, in order to take down the enemy on the battlefield. And the Royal Knight commander, Gloria Grace, was especially strong when compared to Mage Tribunal Judge Tyron. I thought they would quickly return after a victory. However, I guess they lost. King Orpheus wouldn't be this worried if that was the case. Yes, the Royal Knight commander was also defeated by them. We're trying our best to prevent the news from being spread, but I don't think it is possible for us to hide it completely. The knights of the royal family were defeated by the tribal people from the east. Just that news alone would once again drown the entire kingdom in chaos, and the impression of the unshakable royal authority we had painstakingly built would come crumbling down. I need your help. I've heard that he wields a unique power that isn't mana. And you're also the expert when it comes to puzzling incidents. Even Saintess Lucia has already headed there. She and Royal Knight Commander Gloria have been friends since childhood. That information was already known to me. After taking a brief deep breath, I lowered my head. I will accept the mission. We will depart immediately. I'm counting on you. The communication crystal dimmed, and I slowly raised my upper body to look at the dean. As you have heard, I will return shortly. The dean nodded vigorously in response. It didn't take long to prepare for departure. Since it was a dangerous battlefield, we obviously left the pregnant Iluania behind. So it was just Findine, Owen, and me who set out. Professor Felpetra seemed regretful as she looked around the laboratory, which would once again turn desolate. Meanwhile, Erica apologized for not being able to accompany us. Since students like Arya and Eleanor were in the middle of practical training, we were unable to bid them farewell. Gaiwa, I just complained that I didn't have anyone to try this new item on, but I immediately found someone I can use it on. Driving the carriage, Findine grinned contentedly as she looked at the hand of hemomancy I had given her. It was necessary to check its performance in actual battle since it was an item that needed blood to function. Owen, I will keep you in the safest place possible, so you do not need to worry too much. Yes, I'll watch your actions closely with my own eyes, Soul Whisperer. Hey, are you just going to watch while this big sister here fights her heart out? Findine interjected with a teasing tone. I told Owen to ignore her and then fell into thought for a moment. The words spoken by the mountain lord of the Norsweden mountain range during my last visit lingered in my mind. I am already aware that the guardian deity of the Marias forest has abandoned the forest. If a guardian deity abandoned their home, they would lose their almost eternal life, and their formidable power would also weaken rapidly. I couldn't help but feel that this incident might be related to Horua, the great warrior Voxer. By using a unique power that wasn't mana, he was able to defeat the Royal Knight Commander Gloria, one of the few powerhouses in the kingdom. And the important thing was, he is not a character that appears in the game. It was a completely unfamiliar name to me. His existence wasn't even mentioned in the game. And in the first place, there weren't such large-scale events or scenarios where the Marias tribe invaded the kingdom like this in the game. Perhaps the changes I brought about had created a butterfly effect, bringing about such a storm. Nevertheless, it is quite unsettling. From someone using the residents of Sedima as an excuse to commit a massacre, to a man known as the Great Warrior possessing superhuman strength. Because it was full of things I couldn't understand and had various problems that bothered me. I took a deep breath to clear my mind and glanced out the window. In the mountainside village in the east, thick smoke could be seen billowing over the burnt ground of the village, which the Marias tribe had turned into their stronghold. It was inevitable that huge flames would rise with large amounts of meat being roasted and eaten. And this feast was accompanied by the tribe folk dancing around the fire. Thump, 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 thump. Inside the huge tent where the fierce drumming resounded, the great warrior Voxer tore into the meat as he gazed at the shaman who also had the role of a seer, Sayong. Shaking a staff with bells attached, Sayong knelt before a large map of the Griffin Kingdom as he murmured something. As time passed, one of the tokens on the map began to move ever so slightly. Seeing this, Sayong rose abruptly and pointed at the token with his staff. There. That is where the one closest to death, as foretold by the ancestors, was. He's coming. There's still some distance, but judging by the speed, he's riding a carriage. He's coming. Only avoid that man. That was the revelation given to me by the ancestors. Voxer wet his thick lips and made a displeased expression, but Sayong rang the bells again as if urging him to focus. However, Voxer shouted loudly after roughly emptying his beer mug on his side. The souls of the ancestors on my shoulders rest. They guide me. They lead the way for me. It was a warning not to underestimate him. The great warrior possessed the fighting spirit fitting of his name. And on my back are the fiery wings of Lord Horua. The guardian deity himself chose me and commanded me to find salvation for the Marias Great Forest. So, are you implying that despite everything I possess, I will still lose? Even the king's mightiest warrior, the Crimson Female Knight, couldn't challenge me properly and was defeated. I don't mean that you will lose to him. Almost like a warning, Sayong replied in a low voice. Frankly speaking, as you are now, who can defeat you in a duel? However, he is the judge of the dead. Sayong pointed directly at Voxar's chest. The mere sight of him will make the ancestors flee. At his gesture, Horua will fall to the ground. That is the revelation. Please, prevent him from becoming a terror to us. Voxer fell in thought for a moment at Sayong's advice. It was the first time he had heard such a desperate request, and it was also the first time he felt such overwhelming fear. He was someone who could incapacitate him? Even with the power of the ancestors and the guardian deity Horua? Honestly, Voxer found it intriguing. He wanted to go and fight against him once. He wanted to feel just how much of a formidable presence he was with his own skin. However, the three former nobles of the Griffin Kingdom, who were standing politely by his side, spoke up. He's called the Soul Whisperer, a mere someone who protected the North. He's a man who can't even handle his own excrement. Well, take care of him. It was Deus Verdi, the soul whisperer, the same man who made these nobles flee like this. With their fighting spirits burning, the three of them vowed revenge against the soul whisperer. Do as you wish. Voxer felt a little disappointed, but on thinking that if that person could be bested by just these nobles, he wouldn't need to intervene. So he raised his cup again. Honestly, he didn't think that these scarecrow-like nobles would be able to do anything even if they made their move. The great warrior was confident that he would eventually come across that man. So as he enjoyed his dinner, he looked forward to his meeting with the soul. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 133. The Assassin. Chapter 133. The Assassin. What the hell's up with these bastards? On the road heading to the east, Findenay, who had neatly dealt with the assassins who had come to find us, muttered uninterestedly as she shrugged her shoulders. If you came to assassinate us, you should at least show me something, you know? You shameless bastards. It was quite an unusual sight to see a maid scolding some assassins who were also wearing maid uniforms. However, the assassins were so useless that I thought they deserved to be treated like this. I knew Findenay was just being irritable for not having an opportunity to try out her newly acquired equipment, the hand of hemomancy, but I pushed her aside and stood in front of the assassins. When the carriage was suddenly attacked, I wondered who it was. I thought they might have been those fanatical zealots from the church who disliked my existence, but seeing their appearance, it wasn't the case. Who sent you? In response to my question, the assassins shut their mouths tightly and lowered their heads. Was their loyalty that much better compared to their poor skill? Are you going to keep your mouth shut? Just kill us. You filthy dark mage. We already consider ourselves dead. There's no need to prolong this. Their audacious shouts were quite impressive. Maybe they would have been excellent assassins if they had the skills to match. Fine, I will kill you. I conjured a sphere of flames on the palm of my hand. This was my limit since the 4 elemental magic wasn't really compatible with my body. However, I still had some basic knowledge. However, do not think that death is the end. The assassins flinched at my words. They seemed to be from the Griffin Kingdom, but they didn't seem to realize how foolish it was to talk about death in front of a dark mage. I am a necromancer. After killing you, I will capture your souls and inflict eternal suffering on you until the day I die. Tension quickly filled the air. I exuded the kind of intimidation I used when preparing for my lecture, one that even Findenay had acknowledged. Even death cannot escape from me. I'll cut off your limbs, tie a noose around your neck, and drag you around. The assassins started to look up at me with their mouths open, fear beginning to creep into their eyes. Does it sound impossible? If you are already dead, you cannot die again. And since you are dead, you probably will find out that there is no end. Even death will not be your salvation. As I extended my hand to shoot flames, the assassins finally bowed down, shouting desperately in front of me. Romerson. We are under the command of Viscount Romerson. He colluded with the Marias tribe who are moving with him. He ordered us to assassinate you. What is the reason? WWE heard that the Marias tribe fears you, Soul Whisperer. So, before you arrive on the battlefield, they ordered us to assassinate you. Heroin and Bowman are present too, right? Romerson, Heroin, and Bowman. I had heard the names of the nobles who fled to the Marias Great Forest. The assassins had already started nodding their heads in fear even before I finished speaking. Yes, they're all there. It was neat. Findenay, arrest them all and hand them over to the nearby city guards. They'll be taken to the Royal Palace prison. Sure, since I also need to buy some food, I guess I can stop by for a moment. At that, I slightly turned my head. I do not think there should be a shortage of food. Growth period, you know? As I turned to Owen, he immediately shook his head. When I turned my gaze back to Findenay, she just shrugged. Do you think a 27-year-old can no longer grow? So, she was saying she would be eating a lot of food by herself. Since she wasn't allowed to smoke, she was relieving stress in strange ways. After saying she would pay for the food herself, Findenay brought her axe, promptly knocking out the assassins without hesitation by hitting them on the side of their heads. It was a crude but effective method. Owen began tying up the assassins knocked out by Findenay with the rope he brought. Do you really know how to spice things up? Don't you? The dark spiritualist contentedly watched from the side. Of course, the talk about taking away the assassin's souls was an empty threat. I had never considered acting on it, because that was against my principles. The dark spiritualist knew that too, so she smiled slyly while crossing her arms. If someone sees this, they might really think you're an evil dark mage. Forget that. There is something else that is bothering me more. Ha! The dark spiritualist didn't seem to catch on, but there was quite an important issue at hand, especially now that we knew these assassins were very incompetent. I glanced around. Although this place could be called an open field, there were many rocks around, making it a perfect place for assassins to hide. Another thing was there were several paths to the east. Yet, it wouldn't have been easy enough to have assassins stationed at each of them. That only meant they knew my exact location. You should ask the assassins themselves. They do not know. If they did, they would have spilled everything just now. They were probably just waiting here on the orders of those nobles. However, even though the nobles may have sent them, they do not have the capabilities to track my location while on the run. I agree. Then it means that this is something related to the Marias tribe. What do you think? When I glanced at the dark spiritualist, she pouted and shrugged. Even I don't know everything. I've always particularly hated forests, you know? Do you think I would have gone to a place like the Marias Great Forest? Alright, I see. The dark spiritualist indeed looked like the type who would dislike dense forests. However, this matter wasn't something that could be overlooked easily. The fact that neither she nor I felt a different response regarding this meant it wasn't a type of magic dealing with mana. If even the sharp-minded Findine didn't feel anything, it meant they were not trailing or conducting surveillance on us. Didn't Orpheus say that we aren't dealing with someone who wields mana, but something else? Since no tribal people had ever appeared in the game, it was difficult to accurately assess their power. And the important thing is, I was worried that not only could they track my location accurately, but they might also have other means of catching me. The first year's first practical training location was a small forest. Although there were low-level demonic monsters, there weren't many of them. It was practically like going camping. Arya was grilling meat. Happy, the archer, had skillfully caught a wild boar. Since it was too much for the 6-member team to eat it all by themselves, they bartered it for various other food ingredients such as mushrooms, corn, potatoes, and fruits with the other students. Eventually, the tent where Arya's group was in became the wealthiest around. Happy and Florencia enjoyed themselves with their noses raised high, while Leoris and Jean were bothered by the other girls who were asking them for help. Turning the skewered meat back and forth, Arya glanced at another group member next to her. It was a girl with blonde hair wearing a white beret, sitting with a drawing paper on top of her crossed legs. She was Princess Eleanor, a textbook example of someone who had never done something like this. Don't you think you should do something? When Arya asked while staring at her irritably, Eleanor, without much enthusiasm, responded while moving her pen diligently. I would, if there was something to do. Is there really nothing to do? Help me grill something else. When Arya poked Eleanor with her foot, the latter frowned and sighed. Eventually, pushing aside her drawing, Eleanor stood next to Arya, who was handling potatoes and mushrooms skewered on a grill. Considering her status as the princess, the other students would feel burdened being in the same group as Eleanor. So, Deus had forcibly placed her into the same team as Arya, who sort of treated her comfortably. Arya secretly glanced at the drawing Eleanor was working on. This time it depicted her cooking while wearing a magical girl outfit. Hey, I drew it beautifully, didn't I? And we can use that for bartering. What was this about? If I give this to the boys from Group 7, they said they'll take over our night watch duty. We can just go to sleep. It seems like you didn't even consider my opinion on this. Huh? Eleanor simply shrugged and spoke shamelessly. Arya probably would have immediately confronted her if the latter wasn't a princess. After sighing, Arya hesitated for a moment before making a suggestion. Draw me a picture of Professor Deus and then I'll let this matter slide. Do you think I am a street artist? You don't have any say in this. Besides, don't you always draw Professor Deus all the time? That statement wasn't wrong. If she looked at who she drew the most, the first would be Kim Shinwoo, and the second would be Professor Deus. In the end, they were the same person. Actually, the drawing itself wasn't difficult, but Eleanor didn't want to give the drawing of Professor Deus to anyone. Eleanor suddenly remembered her conversation with Happy earlier, so she quickly brought it up. You don't like Professor Deus, do you? Happy. Arya immediately identified the culprit who let Eleanor learn about this, vowing to punish Happy severely when night fell. However, before that, she first decided to calmly respond to Eleanor. I said not yet, didn't I? What do you mean not yet? Snorting in disbelief, Eleanor turned the skewers with potatoes and mushrooms on it before continuing. It seems like someone who used to keep following and calling for Professor Deus is finally regaining her senses. Huh? If you've given up, you should just step back cleanly. Shouldn't you? What say does a princess, who secretly makes drawings of Professor Deus behind his back, have in this? For a moment, the two of them glared at each other. However, despite all this banter, they didn't really drift apart. To Eleanor, Arya was the only female student she knew who treated her without reservations. And to Arya, Eleanor was the only friend she had never gotten close to in the first round. Therefore, both of them basically needed each other, but neither wanted to give the other the upper hand by admitting such things. Sigh. Fine, I got it. I'll draw you one. By any chance, is it possible to have it drawn based on specific clothes or composition? I'll listen to what you want first before making a decision. No, I mean, can you show me a sample? Sample? Before nodding, Arya looked at her with questioning eyes filled with anticipation. Yeah. If there's something that I like from what you've already drawn, I can ask you to draw something similar to it. And no way. Are you crazy? Eleanor suddenly blushed bright red, looking flustered. Arya wondered why she was reacting like that, but after thinking for a while, she too blushed. Hey, wait. No way, you can't. No, it's not like that. Absolutely not. I have no idea what you're thinking, but that's definitely not it. Although Eleanor said that, Arya was still half certain about her thoughts. Eleanor, that bitch, had probably drawn a picture of Deus Verdi that she couldn't show to anyone. It was regrettable that she didn't bring her usual notebook with her, but instead only had a drawing paper with a prop. If she had brought her drawing notebook, Arya would have immediately opened it up and scrutinized what this woman had been doing all this time. We're students. Eleanor forcefully blurted out. Although the princess could try to speak rebelliously, it would just be meaningless talk to Arya. Just as Arya was about to pry further, rustle, rustle. A man emerged from the nearby bushes. With his innocent appearance and glasses on his face, he didn't look either like a student or a professor. He approached the two girls while scratching his head and asked, "Excuse me, I came here to look for Professor Erica. Do you happen to know where she is? First of all, who are you?" When Arya responded sharply, the man awkwardly laughed. "Haha, I'm an acquaintance. I live nearby. Since I heard she was here for practical training, I thought I should stop by and see her for a moment. She's over there." Arya pointed to the tent where Professor Erica was while continuing to roast the skewers. He thanked her and left with a smile. Eleanor, who was listening from the side, stared at the back of the man's head and asked Arya, "That guy, doesn't he have a dagger hidden on his thigh?" Arya responded indifferently to that statement. "I know, but I wouldn't care because I'm just an ordinary student." What was she even saying? Eleanor looked dumbfounded, and then used her extraordinary brain to make various speculations, coming up with the most likely one. He didn't even recognize me as the princess and gave lame excuses. I guess he's probably not a professional assassin. And Professor Erica is not someone significant enough to the point of being targeted by an assassin. Even though she's from the Bright household, I heard she's been somewhat disowned. Then, this means that the only thing left is she's the Soul Whisperer's fiancé. Arya was honestly surprised to hear the deductions Eleanor was slowly spouting out as if unraveling a skein. Even now, she was extremely competent. So, Professor Deus' fiancé is in danger of assassination? At those words, Arya responded as if she was wondering what Eleanor expected her to do. "I'm just an ordinary student, you know? I won't be able to guess if that person was an assassin. Even if I did, I'll just pretend not to know. I think you should go to a hospital or something." Eleanor, who couldn't understand Arya's words at all, grumbled while focusing more on grilling the potatoes and mushrooms. Seeing that, Arya asked irritably, "Then why don't you go and help her? Huh? If she's Professor's fiancé, she should at least be able to handle that level of threat herself. If she can't do that, she should just break off their engagement." It was indeed an absurd response. However, "You're so wise, the future of the country will be so bright. I'm a princess, you know? It's the power of early education." Arya realized that she also sincerely agreed with Eleanor's words. So, the two started to focus on grilling again. "Hey, anyway, how skilled are you at drawing? You should first tell me how complex the drawing you want is. Then you tell me too. After that, gasp. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Turns out you're really amazing." The same exclamation burst out from both of their mouths. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 134. Traveling Companions. Chapter 134. Traveling Companions. At a point far from the mountainside village, which was now the stronghold of the Marias tribe, the outpost where the tents of the royal army were stretched out came into view. Not only did it have sentries standing guard, but sturdy barricades built with locally sourced material were surrounding it as well. From looking at how intricate and sturdy it was, one would find it hard to believe that the outpost was created in just a few days. However, the morale of the soldiers was noticeably low. Those who came out to welcome me had haggard eyes, and they clearly seemed to be drained of energy. Upon seeing them, I couldn't help but think of an army that had nothing to eat, but since the kingdom's army was fighting in their own territory, there shouldn't have been any issues with the supply. "You've arrived." Gloria Grace, the royal knight commander with crimson hair, greeted me calmly. The aides on her side simply nodded briefly as well. There was no grand welcome ceremony. Actually, looking at her face, it reminded me of the conversation we shared at the drinking fest held in the palace. "I heard you faced an assassination attempt on your way here. Are you all right?" They were sent by the traitors who crossed into the forest. They were not really a problem. Hearing my words, some of the knights shuddered and gritted their teeth. The fact that the traitorous nobles, who crossed into the Marias Great Forest, had now sent out assassins further fueled their anger. "It seems like it will be better if I get straight to the point. I heard that you were defeated by the great warrior. Gloria and the other knights as well flinched visibly. And those around her especially didn't even bother hiding their discomfort. This was a battlefield. They should have had a better understanding of the military hierarchy than me. However, it seemed like my special position, officially recognized by His Majesty, was yet to be acknowledged by them. Screech! Kakak! Kakak! Save me! Save me! I manipulated my mana in a manner so that only the screams of the ghosts wandering inside the tent could be heard. This technique was an application of the necromancy I had learned from the dark spiritualist. To be precise, only I, who could see all the dead, could use it to create this kind of atmosphere. The dark spiritualist saw it and christened it the pretending to be a sinister man technique. The knights flinched as screams suddenly echoed from inside the tent, and immediately looked at me. Do I have to act cautiously around all of you just because your defeat was humiliating? It was a clear warning. A firm declaration to not look down on my position recklessly. It was impossible for the royal knights to fail to notice that, and they bowed deeply, unable to utter a word. I apologize. Our military officers are sensitive to victories and defeats. Gloria, who hadn't done anything wrong, immediately rose and bowed deeply to me as well. Seeing her do so, the other knights flinched again and looked away. She did it on purpose. Gloria deliberately took the lead to set an example to ensure the knights didn't treat me disrespectfully. She demonstrated that if they failed to do so, she would be the one who would suffer from humiliation. All right, I accept your apologies. As I let the matter pass smoothly, Gloria also raised her head. I thought she was about to give me a briefing, but that wasn't the case. Saintess Lucia will also arrive here in about 2 hours. As the explanation might take quite a while, I'll explain everything to the both of you then. All right, I have assigned you a personal tent. However, it will be difficult for us to allocate individual tents to your maid and the boy as well. I do not expect that much. The two of them can stay in the same tent as me. Then Walter here will show you the way. Just wait here for a moment. Knight Walter immediately walked up to the front, gave a courteous salute, and then politely motioned for me to follow. Please follow me, Soul Whisperer. The treatment was clearly different. I then followed him to the large tent they had already set up for me. I called for Findinay and Owen, who were waiting, and we went together. After ushering us to the tent, Walter gave another salute before he cautiously retreated outside the tent. Military discipline is impressive, isn't it? Findinay clicked her tongue and muttered in amazement. Then, while Findinay and Owen unpacked, I stepped outside the tent once again. Although I couldn't see the enemy's stronghold from here, I could still feel a strange energy. It wasn't mana, but a different sensation. Similar to the pressure exerted by the mountain lord of the Norsweden mountain range, it felt like the entirety of nature was observing us. As expected, Horua, the guardian deity, is interfering in this matter. Although his power was similar to that of the mountain lord, he wouldn't be able to display his full power since he was outside the Marias Great Forest. A sudden thought emerged. It seemed that he probably teamed up with the man known as the Great Warrior. Then what is his goal? While they were using the pretext of seeking revenge for the chieftain and the residents of Sedima, in reality it was a weak excuse. Mere sugar-coated words from the former nobles of the kingdom wouldn't sway them enough to even make them consider fighting the gigantic monster called Griffin. They must have had other reasons for starting this war, but I couldn't grasp what they might be. And just like that, time passed. Although Gloria said 2 hours, it was already late. The sun had set, and the day turned into night. Only then did the carriage carrying the Saintess arrive at the outpost. And then, wow, it's the Saintess. Saintess Lucia. The gods are with us. We will win this battle. A massive crowd welcomed Lucia. The soldiers who were exhausted and weary from the cruelty of war cheered towards the Saintess. Now, I could understand why King Orpheus had dispatched Lucia here. Wow, it's totally different from the treatment you received, Master Bastard. This treatment is ridiculously different. Like day and night. For me, you are the greatest soul whisperer. Findinay, the dark spiritualist, and Owen. Each of them displayed different reactions. Although Lucia and I were in similar positions, the manner in which we were treated was completely different. It wasn't exactly disappointing. However, all of a sudden, Stella, who was sleeping inside me, came to my mind. She must still be sound asleep, right? I just hoped that her rest wouldn't be disturbed by the heat of the battlefield and the screams of the dead. ITLL, take a moment. Let's wait by the command tent. Upon seeing their reactions, even Knight Commander Gloria felt awkward, so she ushered me away. Well, I didn't want to be bothered by that, so I instructed Findinay and Owen to return to my tent for now and followed Gloria. So, after a while, Lucia finally appeared amidst the cheers of the soldiers, smiling awkwardly as she stepped inside. Long time no see, Deus Gloria. With her silver hair still striking as ever, Saintess Lucia smiled gracefully as she greeted me. If I had to compare, her hair color was similar to Findane's, but the atmosphere they carried was completely different. If that woman was like a beast, this woman was like a maiden. That was how it could be summed up. Especially you, Deus. Thank you for your work at the Elia convent. I've heard about everything from Reverend Mother. Indeed, do not forget. Gloria seemed dumbfounded at my response, but Lucia just smiled knowingly. Then, she took a step forward towards me and spoke in a whisper. However, since we were in the tent, it was clearly audible to everyone. Has Lady Stella found rest? Yes, however, she will need to sleep for a while as she must have been fairly tired. I see. I'm relieved then. Lucia smiled brightly and nodded slightly in gratitude. I accepted it without attaching much significance to it. Thump. HM? I felt something surge in my chest all of a sudden. Not that I had changed anything. It felt like someone else's emotions were crashing over me instead of my own. And it seemed to be some sort of tantrum. Was she acting up just because they were both saintesses? I wasn't completely oblivious, so to avoid disturbing Stella's rest, I kept my distance from Lucia. Tilting her head, Lucia asked what the problem was, however, before I could respond. So, let's start with the briefing about the situation. Although it was a little late, Gloria began her briefing. The situation itself was simple. They fought against the Marias tribe to suppress them but lost, so they retreated from the stronghold of the tribal people and built an outpost in this place. It was simple, but the implications were significant. Well, the other members aren't much of a threat. They're skilled warriors, but compared to us, they're laughable. But the key difference is the great warrior, Voxer. Gloria's voice faltered. I could tell that she had struggled a lot with this. He's truly beyond measure. I was unable to even put up a proper fight against him and was defeated. I've never seen anyone who could be fittingly called a one-man army. One-man army. As Lucia pondered over those words, her expression began changing subtly. Though inexperienced in battle, Lucia knew the strength of Gloria, her childhood friend. Seeing Gloria devastated by someone to this extent must have been a first for her. Strategies and tactics are ineffective against him. He doesn't use mana but wields a different type of power, and when the red wings on his back unfurl, his agility surpasses imagination. Horua's wings. As expected, Horua, who abandoned the Marias Great Forest, seemed to have descended directly into the Great Warrior. Hold on. At that moment, the dark spiritualist, the saintess and I simultaneously turned our gazes outside the tent. The Knight Commander realized it a beat later, and then, screams of agony began to pour out. We were immediately met by a copper-skinned man with a hideous tattoo as we stepped out of the tent. Reminiscent of Icarus I from Greek mythology, fiery flames, like surging hot waves, and burning wings surrounded him, and its owner was the great warrior Voxer. Behind him, warriors riding lizards engaged in skirmishes with knights. Voxar's booming voice echoed throughout the barracks. Who among you is the sole whisperer Deus Verdi? Come forth and face my spear. Being singled out like that, the attention of the three women was immediately directed at me. Wait a moment. Don't react and just hide for now. Retreat along with me. You're not a warrior, so there's no need for you to fight. Come behind me. The dark spiritualist and Lucia tried to hide me, while Gloria drew her sword to become a barrier to protect me. Just as Findane came out from the tent and was coming in my direction, I gently pushed Lucia aside and replied, I am the sole whisperer Deus Verdi. It felt like the sharp gaze of a hunter had penetrated accurately. Voxer snorted and thumped the ground with his spear as our eyes met. If you are so outstanding, let's compete in martial arts. This great warrior will judge your skills. That's nonsense. When the great warrior made a proposal to fight me unknown, Gloria was startled and tried to stop me. My gaze was solely focused on him, and he also only looked at me. Ignoring the shouts of the dark spiritualist and Lucia, I moved forward and reassured Gloria as I passed by her. The last was Findane. As she ran up to me, she hesitated for a moment, and then threw her axe to the ground with a sigh. It was a sign that she wouldn't interfere. Are you confident you'll win? At her question, I glanced at Voxer slyly and snorted. He is a weakling who relies on borrowed strength. My evaluation of Voxer seemed to have pleased her as Findane chuckled and nodded approvingly. Ha, you're one to talk, seeing as you're just a weakling. Don't worry, Master Bastard. They'll give you a nice massage when you're back. Let's make Owen sleep outside our tent. Please refrain from speaking like that when Owen is around. Subtle glances surged from behind me. Gloria and Lucia, who just moments ago were worried, looked at me strangely, and in front of others as well. But this is like my trademark. Just that one statement was more than enough to dampen my morale. I ignored it and strode towards the stage confidently. I stood in front of Voxer, who had the wings of flames spread out. The souls of your ancestors, the guardian deity Horua. It seems like you are traveling with some pretty remarkable individuals. Interestingly, as soon as I stood there, the atmosphere reversed. Voxar's eyes, which just moments ago looked confident, were now trembling slightly. I didn't need to do anything special, because the souls of the ancestors, which were clinging to Voxar, were now trembling in fear as they attempted to flee, while the power of Horua was weak, allowing me to overpower him easily. Was it because he was in a position to borrow strength? Voxar seemed to have sensed something as he bit his thick lips and asked, "Then what exactly are you traveling with?" "Nothing special." Although I had captured the soul of the Necromancer Dina, Voxar would probably just snort at someone of her level. However, there is a former saintess who has now become Starlight. She was a presence that no one in this place would dare touch. Coincidentally, within me, accompanying her, was a slumbering monster. Voxar's senses were keen. Too keen indeed. With the energy of Horua, he had gained a sense that was close to foresight. However, that became the decisive factor that led to his defeat. The demon lord of deformities might also be present within. That was why he was even able to notice the energy of the demon lord Velika. Sleeping alongside the saintess within. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 135, Reverse Scale. Chapter 135, Reverse Scale. A brief standoff. The roaring flames and the sharp noises of battle echoed around. Amidst the ominous and tense situation, Voxar and I locked our gazes at each other. Although he glared at me as if he would lunge at me with his spear at any moment, he didn't act upon it. It was because the ancestors on Voxar's shoulders and behind his back were leaving him as if fleeing. Unease, eeriness. The great warrior was bewildered when the power he held in his hands began to scatter. Thinking the mighty power was a gift bestowed upon him, the great warrior found himself unable to move as it actually started to vanish. Now was the chance while he was distracted. I slowly spoke up to attempt dialogue. Not with Voxar but with the being beyond him, the red eagle of the great forest. I wanted to talk to the deity who was giving strength to the great warrior at the cost of his own life. Why did you forsake your home and endure such hardship? How dare you speak to? Enough! A dignified voice echoed as if emanating from the sky. It was a different sensation when compared to the imposing presence of the Mountain Lord, which spread heavily throughout the body and stung the skin like lightning. Curiously, it sounded like a rather delicate voice coming from a man of mystifying beauty, but the heat within it contained the weight of years that couldn't be attributed to mere human existence. You are the noblest one in this most despicable place. Horua's evaluation of me was more favorable than expected, and upon hearing it, Voxar's eyes seemed to tremble. Your actions have reached me as well. Thanks to your existence, the subjects of the kingdom can peacefully close their eyes. That is an excessive compliment. Just like the Mountain Lord, Horua had also responded favorably to me. I thought that if I could persuade Horua to take away his power from the great warrior, the battle would essentially end easily. However, that would be difficult. Even as we conversed, Voxar's crimson wings were burning so brightly. He showed no sign of retreating. However, do not think that the comfort you gave them applies to me. Your nobility is great, but also foolish. Are you trying to embrace everything? Even demons? Velika is not a demon you can easily define after all. She bears the title of Demon Lord of Deformities only in name. Even Velika herself admitted that her disposition as a demon was strangely twisted. And although the Mountain Lord let the matter of the Demon Lord slide due to his trust in me, Horua did not. Do not reach out to me with your dirty hands. I do not need any comfort from you. It was a clear refusal, a declaration that Horua would not explain why he lent his power to the great warrior. Rather, Voxar smirked and adjusted his stance while holding his spear, perhaps gaining confidence from this conversation. With just one flap of his wings, he displayed overwhelming speed accompanied by the sound of strong wind. However, crush, this is, if we have one thing in common. The menacing tip of his spear, which he brandished with confidence, didn't reach me. Suddenly, hundreds of hands grabbed his ankles when he attempted to strike me. All of them were the citizens of the kingdom he had massacred. We both at least have the same place to run wild, don't we? For a great warrior like him, the battlefield was undoubtedly the place where he could shine the most. He could gloriously traverse the battlefield, decimating enemies and slitting throats while intoxicated by the scent of battle. On the other hand, for me, the battlefield, where countless dead lay, was where I could exert the greatest power. He might have feared the Saintess and the Demon Lord who were sleeping within me. However, it was a perfect stage where I didn't need to disturb the two who were peacefully resting. I pulled out Lemegeton from my pocket. I needed to clearly demonstrate the power gap between us. The black waves emanating from Lemegeton began to spread. The sky churned and the earth began to tremble. Gah! Why? Namiai! Save me. Please. Save me. He massacred everyone, regardless of age or gender. It meant that he took the weight of life so lightly, and with that, he had to take responsibility for it. The souls of the dead were pouring out. The cries and screams of the dead expressed their regrets about wanting to live. It is to this extent. Oh my God. Like clouds covering the sky, like new sprouts rising from the ground. As the dead continuously rose and materialized, Findine and Gloria, who were behind me, exclaimed in amazement. Lucia knelt carefully, closing her eyes and clasping her hands together. And the great warrior, who was marked by all this resentment, sweated profusely, swallowing hard. The overwhelming number of dead people around him had drained the strength from his hands, which were gripping the spear. It seems like you do not even know the weight of death. On the contrary, I could feel more strength flowing into my hand as I held Lemegeton. Although my emotions were faint, I was certain that, at this moment, I was enraged. It wasn't the explosive rage like a volcano erupting, but that of a sharp and cold rage which descended like frost on the icy ground in midwinter. I may not like everything that happened here, but among the things I do dislike, what I happen to dislike the most is you. Without a moment of hesitation, the souls flew towards the great warrior, seeking vengeance on the person who had killed them. Arg. He swung his spear desperately, attempting to retaliate. The souls of the ancestors who accompanied him tried to protect the great warrior, but it wasn't enough. He ended up buried under the souls, with only one hand protruding. I spoke to the great warrior accusingly. If you claim to act for the people of Sedima, you should have at least said a word for them. If he waged war to get revenge for the chieftain's death and the massacre of the people of Sedima, he should have at least mentioned them for a moment. If he had done so, I might have shown him a bit of mercy. But you used them as tools. Indeed, you are no different. He merely needed them as an excuse to open the battlefield. Now, Voxar's screams could no longer be heard. Along with him, other tribe warriors who were using guerrilla warfare had already met their demise at the swords of the kingdom's knights. In other words, he might have attempted a surprise attack, but ultimately it was a complete failure. He was overly confident in his own strength, which led him to a foolish end that was no different from what Lu Bu and Xiang Yuan, historical figures from Earth, had experienced. However, if there was one distinction, it was that God had forsaken them, while Voxar's deity hadn't forsaken him. Whoosh! The guardian deity's flames created a massive pillar, burning the souls. The surging souls began to retreat uniformly, and I too drew mana to prevent them from suffering. Voxar flew away as if he was spat out by the pillar of flame. And although he was already covered in blood and unconscious, Horua's wings forcibly carried him high into the sky. It clearly showed Horua's firm determination to at least save the great warrior. I thought I could secure a perfect victory, but Voxar managed to escape. However, it seemed unnecessary for me to join the battlefield any further. Perhaps he had developed considerable trauma towards me. He must have realized he couldn't rely on the power of his ancestors and Horua anymore. This was a war brought by the great warrior Voxar alone. It practically showed the difference in our levels. The moment he became dispirited, the war was practically over. Cough, cough. Thanks to Horua's mercy, Voxar, who barely escaped, was receiving treatment inside his tent. When the treatment was somewhat complete, Voxar struggled to sit up as he pushed aside the woman who was wiping his spilled blood. Then, as if waiting for him, Shaman Sayong's sharp reprimand fell upon him. Didn't I tell you? You shouldn't have fought him. We could have engaged in battles without confronting him by utilizing the mobility of our tribe. I said we could have won. Our ancestors have abandoned you, and even Horua's power has been limited. Eventually, our tribe and the great forest will be devoured by the desert. Looking at Sayong, who cried out that there was no future for their tribe and home anymore, Voxar felt a sense of fatigue and a headache akin to parasites crawling in his head. It was the first time that he, who had always been victorious, had suffered such a brutal defeat. He couldn't even properly swing his spear at the enemy and just tragically suffered, having fled at the end. And now, he also realized how heavy the weight of the slaughter he had committed so far was. Voxar didn't want to move anywhere because he was afraid of all of that. He only wanted to flee. Just before his heart was completely broken, Sayong sighed and brought out the map. We still have one last resort to counterattack. And that if you don't collapse yet, here. Thud. Sayong's finger on the map pointed to Lobern, where the academy was located. His weakness is here. If only we can secure this, there won't even be a need to fight him. Haven't those nobles already all failed? When they brought up the fact that they had completely failed to assassinate the Soul Whisperer and his fiancée, the nobles being mentioned who had been as quiet as dead rats in the corner of the tent flinched. After the failed assassination, the positions of the three nobles became even more precarious. In particular, the German kingdom, with which they had a connection, had now completely abandoned them. So, if the Marias tribe failed as well, it would be their end. If they stayed like this, they would eventually die. Noble Romerson, who thought so, took a step forward and shouted, "There's still a chance. If we can just capture the Soul Whisperer, we will eventually win. Well, find out his weakness for sure." They still had a connection with their informant operating in Lobern. However, it was a dangerous relationship that could be severed at any time soon if this assassination failed completely. Hearing Romerson's words, Sayong added one more thing. "Are you just going to collapse here? A great warrior of your caliber? The fight has just begun. Don't kneel down after just one loss." Voxer, who had been clenching his teeth, took a deep breath and tightened his fist. Even now, just the thought of the Soul Whisperer's cold gaze piercing through him still froze his entire body. "I am the great warrior." Knowing he was in a position where he had no choice but to overcome this wall, Voxer nodded. "Go find his weakness and tell me. I will personally go to Lobern with the wings of Lord Horua." It was a firm determination that he wouldn't ever entrust to the nobles again. It was a logical judgment, given the mobility of Horua's wings, which could shuttle to and from Lobern in a short period. However, Romerson was actually curious about Shaman Sayong's intentions. As far as he knew, there were no weaknesses of the Soul Whisperer, Deus Verdi, in Lobern Academy right now. His fiancée, Erica Bright, was away on practical training the princess. Eleanor Liddon Griffin and the commoner girl he cherished were the same. What could possibly be in Lobern? Sayong accurately pointed out a specific person. "Now, go find the pregnant woman who has been pregnant for about 7 to 8 months. A pregnant woman? Just hearing it made his head feel dizzy. Could it be Deus Verdi's hidden mistress? That was something that Romerson could think of. However, that pregnant woman is the equivalent of the Soul Whisperer's reverse scale. Hearing Sayong's words and seeing Voxer urging him to move quickly, Romerson hastily took out a communication crystal from his pocket, contacting his attendants in Lobern. But even as he did so, a sense of unease crept into his heart. Reverse scale? The reverse scale was indeed usually considered a weakness. However, doesn't touching it mean certain death for the one who dares to do so? A shiver ran down his spine. If the Soul Whisperer, who made even the great warrior tremble like this, truly became enraged, what would happen? For a moment, Romerson felt an impulse that perhaps surrendering right now would be the best thing to do. However, the pressure from Voxer and Sayong continued to weigh heavily on him. Romerson could only imbue mana into the communication crystal, hoping for one thing. He hoped that after touching the Soul Whisperer's reverse dragon scale, the great warrior would have managed to sever the dragon's neck before his wrath could reach. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 136, Soul Whisperer. Chapter 136, Soul Whisperer. Cough. It's heavy. Is the piano supposed to be this heavy? To express his gratitude, Owen bowed to each soldier who helped move the piano until they were sweating profusely. The soldiers accepted the water bottles he handed out, and in response to the boy's appreciation, they cheered him on to work hard before leaving. This was the first mountainside village that was attacked. The Marias tribe had abandoned the mountainside village stronghold after their great warrior was defeated by me and fled back into the deep forest. Although this situation was akin to that of a rat fleeing back into its hole, Knight Commander Gloria had no intention of letting it slide. The situation had escalated to a point where there was even a royal decree ordering them to bring back the culprit who had slaughtered the citizens of the kingdom from within the deep forest. However, I had no intention of following her, as I had other duties to attend to. Just as Saintess Lucia's appearance was greatly welcomed by the soldiers and boosted their morale, in contrast, I needed to ensure that the deceased found peaceful rest. After forcefully airlifting a piano here, I stood in the square of the ruined mountainside village. As I waited for a moment, the dark spiritualist approached me. "Everyone, including the soldiers who helped move the piano, have left. It's just you and that child in this village now." "I see. Thank you. I'll take my leave as well. Being a dark mage, my presence here will not be a good influence anyway." The dark spiritualist remained hidden as it was. With a calm demeanor, I closed my eyes and let my feelings settle. A cool breeze carried the drifting clouds and naturally obscured the scorching summer sun. Seemed like it would rain. Thinking so, I slowly reach out and place a spherical cover over Owen's piano. Even if it rained now, the water wouldn't seep into the piano. And just in case the boy got tired, bottles of water were placed nearby. "You should start now." "Yes, I got it." Owen, who had worn the elegant musician's attire he used to wear back in the old city he lived in, slowly sat down in front of the piano and began to move his fingers. Ding. He pressed a key and the sound resonated. Slowly, those individual sounds merged into one, becoming a melody, a dirge to call forth souls who met their deaths amidst injustice and agony. They were like moths flocking to a light in the late night. Hundreds of souls began to gather around me on hearing Owen's performance. While I could summon them more efficiently if I used Lemigiton, I didn't want to do that because it was a kind of coercion. After suffering unwanted deaths, I didn't want to strip away their freedom once more. I looked at the souls that had gathered around and asked, "How was it?" No one replied. They simply listened patiently, waiting for me to continue. "Are you feeling a bit relieved after driving away the great warrior yesterday?" At that, numerous responses poured out. Some souls responded that it felt exhilarating. Another said they felt relieved. Some trembled with fear. With tears accompanying their words, another soul pleaded about the injustice they felt, while others lamented, saying it was all meaningless. Hearing all their responses, I nodded calmly. Amidst all this, a soul directed a question at me. "So what was the correct answer? Since you have summoned us, you must know the answer. How were we supposed to act?" In the midst of their varying emotions, I smiled in response to their demand for an answer. "All the emotions you all possess are the correct answers. It is true that you have met unjust deaths. However, unfortunate as it may be, you must accept that your lives have come to an end here. It was a sorrowful event. It was also a cruel declaration. However, it was something that needed to be stated clearly and resolutely. It wouldn't be surprising if many souls believed that they were still alive, leading most of them to turn into evil spirits. Grudges weren't something that you only held before you died. They might be ordinary souls now, but because of the emotions they may acquire after death, they could become evil spirits. And with so many of them closing their eyes simultaneously, there were high chances that they wouldn't just become evil spirits, but perhaps they would wander around like the yokai created from thought forms. This was cruel for them, but you no longer have a place on this continent, I declared firmly, and with that they split into two camps. Those who accepted their fate and those who didn't, each harboring their own emotions. "This is cruel. You're so cruel. I did nothing wrong. Please at least spare our children. Please. They're still so young. Spare me," I said. "Why should I die? I'm not dead yet." Their reactions were understandable. I knew it was somewhat cruel. However, it was something I had to do, and this was the only thing I could offer them. "Then, why did you provide us with this opportunity?" An old soul, resembling the village chief, approached me slowly. Using him as the starting point, I slowly scanned the crowd. From the young villagers to the children, the village old ladies, the members of the local defense force, the dispatched knights who had died, etc. I looked at the numerous people and answered them gently. "It is to listen. It is to listen to your stories. To give ear to the sadness you carry within you. Please unburden yourselves to me. I was Deus Verdi, the soul whisperer. You must have many stories you wish to share. Soon you will all fall into a deep sleep for a long time. Therefore, to ensure you remain undisturbed during that time, this was a place I had prepared for the deceased. Sit around me and share your stories with me. A short nap will not hurt you." I slowly bowed towards them, showing them respect. "Please give me the opportunity to bring you comfort." And thus began a slightly lengthy farewell. Before she led the knights into Mariah's great forest, Knight Commander Gloria gazed towards the mountainside village with her childhood friend, Lucia. Dark clouds hung heavy in the gloomy sky, appearing prepared to release the rain at any moment. Nevertheless, a soft piano melody flowed out from the village. And then, tearful cries mixed with shouts of anger and sighs of resignation filled the air. And towards the end, voices of gratitude echoed. Hearing the various sounds, Gloria was experiencing complex emotions for the first time in her life. Whether it was joy, disgust, or awe, she was unable to discern it. But she was sure of one thing. Within the village, the soul whisperer was performing some ceremony for the deceased. Witnessing that, Saintess Lucia shut her eyes tightly and prayed. Not wanting to interrupt her prayer, Gloria waited for a moment. After about 10 minutes, Lucia slowly opened her eyes because she couldn't take too much time either, as she also had to enter Mariah's great forest. "Let's go." After Lucia ended her prayer, Gloria hesitated for a moment at the words of the saintess, and asked as she could no longer contain her curiosity. "What is Deus Verdi doing there? Huh? Can't you hear those tremendous sounds? It doesn't seem like it will end in just a day or two." That statement was true. It would likely take quite some time. He would never just simply send away any of those souls. That was the type of person he was. And that was why Lucia could trust and rely on him to do that. He's comforting the dead. Because he was the soul whisperer. Because he was someone who comforted souls. As if waiting for that response, Gloria's expression changed subtly. "Is it really possible? Huh?" Lucia tilted her head and made a puzzled sound as she did not expect to hear such a question from a knight like her childhood friend. Even though she knew that talking about such things didn't suit her, Gloria still continued. "After all, they're people who have died unfairly. What can he, someone who is practically a stranger, offer the victims of a massacre?" She hadn't said anything wrong. It was indeed impossible to completely resolve everything, and Lucia also knew that it was a form of arrogance. You're right, at best all he can do is take passive actions. He would simply listen to their stories, empathize, converse, discuss, and argue with them. He would spend a very long time with the dead. But if you look at it from a different perspective, other than him, there's no one else who can do that, right? At that statement, Gloria was momentarily stunned, speechless. Lucia was right. It was the only act Lucia, the saintess, couldn't carry out. This was something only the soul whisperer, Deus Verdi, could do. He's not there to comfort them with sweet talks. He's not going to try to convince anyone to simply close their eyes. He probably would just sit there and cry with them. Upon hearing that, Gloria wondered if Deus Verdi could even shed tears. After all, he seemed so cool-headed, as if he possessed no tear glands at all. However, our knights must be there as well, right? Of course. I hope he treats them well. Thinking of the comrades she had been with, Gloria slowly closed her eyes. She wasn't praying to God. It didn't feel right because she feared that her wishes might be sent to the wrong place, like a letter with a wrong address. The prayer of the knight commander was directed towards the man who was shedding tears inside the village. After that, she felt a slight relief. It wasn't just because he was comforting the fallen knights, but because when she thought of the possibility that if she were to close her eyes on this battlefield, he would send her off as well. That notion somehow brought deep comfort to her. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 137, Before He Comes. Chapter 137, Before He Comes. The place was called the Saint Rant Hotel. As the tallest building in Lobern, the hotel was considered to be one of the top 5 hotels within the kingdom. It offered excellent service, various supplementary facilities, and a high-quality buffet which was served daily. Iluania always felt uneasy about staying in this place. She often wondered if a woman like herself, who had rolled her dirty body around the red light district in the northern region, could ever find a place to belong. She closed her eyes and gently stroked her swollen stomach, feeling her child inside as she entertained such thoughts. This was a lifestyle she couldn't have imagined just a year ago. Even now, Iluania thought that she was unworthy of such treatment, but with a parent's heart, she had decided to shamelessly provide for her child. With a single-minded determination for her child, she cut down on drugs and only put good things into her mouth. She only hoped that the rough treatment she had done to her body until now wouldn't affect her child greatly. He'll be fine, right? However, she couldn't help but worry about Deus Verdi, who had become her master. This time, when he said he was going to the battlefield, Iluania hoped he'd return home in good condition as soon as possible. Due to his prolonged absence from Sweden back then, it was impossible for him to be the father of her child. However, Iluania hoped to stand by Dea's side if possible. She also wished for him to name the child. Iluania smiled happily as she caressed her swollen belly. For this child, she was prepared to do anything. Knock! Knock! A knock then came from outside the door. Room service. Room service? Since she hadn't ordered anything, wondering what could have arrived, Iluania headed towards the door. Huh? Suddenly, she felt sweltering heat surrounding the entire room. It didn't feel awkward or frightening because she knew who was beside her. Is there a problem? Iluania turned her gaze towards an empty space, where the faint figure of a woman with profound resentment gradually appeared. It's dangerous. Deus Verdi once told her that the deeper the grudge one held, the stronger the manifestation of evil spirits became. At the time, she was unable to imagine the severity of the grudge of this woman with burns on her face. It was to the point that even an ordinary person like herself could see it. Iluania tightly clutched her belly and nodded. However, she now understood. She, too, would fall into despair and anger if anything happened to her child. Iluania was about to contact the front desk urgently. Crush. The doorknob was destroyed and the door quickly swung open, revealing a number of thugs entering the room. She remembered hearing the hotel employees' words yesterday when the guests next door arrived, mentioning that they were switching rooms. It was them. Disguised as guests, the thugs attempted to attack her, pulling out hidden daggers while wearing smiles on their faces. Just come with us obediently. We don't want to harm a pregnant woman. But if we have to, we will. Iluania was about to ask why they were doing this. However, Kayak. Half of her body was completely burnt. The fire alarm activated and mana-infused water poured from the ceiling to suppress the fire, flooding the floor. Although it was a device designed to make it easier for water magic users to control their magic, the intense heat simply evaporated everything. Kara. What the? It's a monster. A monster. The fiery hatred from the guardian spirit began to burn the thugs' bodies. The flames made of resentment were fueled by a determination and obsession to prevent any harm to the child. Upon seeing the guardian spirit instantly engulf itself in response to this emergency, Iluania wondered if she was overreacting a bit. Yet, when she considered the danger her child was in, she believed it wasn't even enough. Footsteps of the hotel staff echoed in the hallway. Despite the sudden crisis, Iluania attempted to remain as calm as possible to avoid burdening the child in her womb. The guardian spirit didn't disappear, but instead clenched her fist as if preparing to go on a rampage. Following that, there was a thud that resonated through the building. Being on the top floor, Iluania realized something had landed on the rooftop. "Are you okay? What is this? Let's take care of your body first." Since she was a special guest directly instructed for by the Soul Whisperer, the hotel staff prioritized securing Iluania's safety above all else. Crash. The ceiling collapsed, crushing the employees beneath it as they screamed. Iluania's guardian spirit tried to ignite flames again to eliminate the threat. However, unfortunately, her flames were absorbed into the wings of the guardian deity and disappeared. Run. She tried to make Iluania flee by any means necessary. But instead, crush. A spear thrust through the rising smoke, precisely piercing the woman. It might have caused no harm if it were an ordinary spear. However, it was imbued with the power of the guardian deity Horua. The guardian spirit, unable to speak properly, struggled to pull out the spear pierced through her chest before collapsing limply. No. Even though she knew the woman was already dead, Iluania didn't want to see her in agony. Squeeze. A thick, giant palm clasped around her throat. Beyond the smoke, the great warrior with copper skin and crimson wings stared at Iluania. He then spoke. The Soul Whisperer's reverse scale. With that one sentence, Iluania immediately understood. It turns out I have become an obstacle to him. I'm sorry. The battle in Mariah's Great Forest was proceeding more smoothly than expected. Fighting outside the kingdom's land posed challenges, and adapting to the jungle was quite tricky. However, after discovering that the great warrior had ventured outside late at night, Gloria decided not to reach for unattainable stars but rather siege their home. Gloria continued to employ a persistent strategy, having already contacted the palace regarding the pursuit of the great warrior. They had definitely put the Mariah's tribe in a predicament. However, with the unexpected return of the great warrior, the royal army had no choice but to retreat for a moment. Knight Commander Gloria was certain they could win if they simply regrouped and waited. However, the great warrior suddenly brought a pregnant woman before the royal army and declared in front of them, "The moment the Soul Whisperer appears on this battlefield, I will slit this woman's throat." It was such a ridiculous and absurd declaration. They wondered about the identity of the pregnant woman and questioned the rationale behind such a threat, attempting to use her life as a hostage amidst the hundreds already lost on the battlefield. Certainly, the life of a pregnant woman was precious, but this was a battlefield where people by the hundreds were dying. Therefore, the soldiers judged that the provocation demonstrated the desperation of the Mariah's tribe. That lunatic. However, Findine, who was familiar with the pregnant hostage, reacted differently. She glared at the great warrior with fierce determination, ready to wield her axe at any moment. Gloria and Saintess Lucia, who didn't know much about Iluania, received an explanation from Findine. In response, they looked dumbfounded. It seems like he finds the Soul Whisperer really terrifying, huh? Sigh, oh god. The situation itself was ambiguous. If someone suggested to stop the war by using the life of a pregnant woman as a hostage, they would likely scoff and tell them to stop the nonsense and to dismiss it. However, he simply stipulated that the Soul Whisperer should not appear on the battlefield. At that, they hesitated for a moment but quickly reached an answer. Anyway, the Soul Whisperer has no intention of joining the battlefield anymore, because he was still conducting the memorial rites for those who died in the war. Occasionally, there were reports of the piano stopping its notes, but the memorial rites continued without interruption for days. It had already been several days. "We'll handle it ourselves." Gloria declared this, and the other adjutants had no major objections. After all, their enemies were simply cornered in a desperate situation. Having won several victories in the Mariah's Great Forest, the upcoming battle was practically the final blow to secure their victory. No matter how strong the great warrior was, there was no way he could do anything in this situation, right? Findine, who was preparing to enter the war, was sharpening her axe. She was unusually calm and had lit a cigarette in her mouth. It was the luxury item given by Deus. It was the first time she actually smoked it. The scent of the cigarette was quite deep, something she liked. Saintess Lucia carefully approached Findine as the latter was sharpening not only her usual folding axe, but also the thick axes she brought as spares. Since Findine's demeanor was so intimidating, Lucia was being cautious. Nevertheless, there was something she had to tell her. "Your name is Findine, right? Do you happen to know about the spirit accompanying the Soul Whisperer?" Of course, she knew about the spirit because although she hadn't directly seen her face, she had seen Deus muttering to himself several times. "She has a message to pass on to you." Upon reflection, Findine realized that the Saintess also had the ability to see spirits. She exhaled a puff of smoke before nodding. What is it? I don't know when the Soul Whisperer will be done with his ritual, but we have to end the war before that happens. Or, at the very least, rescue the pregnant woman who has become a hostage. Otherwise, he might cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. Findine understood best how much Deus had favored and cared for Iluania, as she was the one who had experienced that discrimination firsthand. If Deus were to find out that Iluania had fallen into the enemy's hands in such a bloody battlefield, and on top of that, at the most critical moment, huff! Findine flicked the cigarette butt onto the ground and extinguished it as she picked up her axes. Don't worry, Master Bastard will never know. Then, gripping the axe with both hands, she marched forward without. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 138. Dark Mage. Chapter 138. Dark Mage. Sigh, that fucking bastard. Spitting out a vulgar curse, Findine gritted her teeth and regulated her breathing. She discarded her axe and drew another one from her waist since her first axe blade had been cleaved off perfectly. She felt like she should have at least carried a cigarette with her. Although she did have a case of cigarettes in her pocket, they weren't something she would like to put in her mouth in this situation. After all, they were a luxury item meant to be appreciated thoroughly. Their taste and aroma savored perfectly. Eventually, Findine gritted her teeth again and took a deep breath after holding back her impulses. Her opponent's attacks were fierce, making the fight more challenging than expected. And having the great warrior among them made a stark difference, compared to when he was absent. However, Findine realized that it wasn't just because of the great warrior's skill. Growl. A demonic beast resembling a black panther charged from the inside of the forest. Its long fangs poised to shatter her head completely. However, Findine, who had already sensed the danger in advance, swung down the axe she had raised high. Crash. The demonic monster's skull was smashed, blood spurting all over the ground. The great warrior's strength was undoubtedly formidable. However, ever since he was defeated by Deus, the amount of power he could unleash was no longer to the point where he alone could control the entire battlefield. Their roles were now reversed. Instead of Horua lending his strength to the great warrior was now lending his body to Horua. Under the command of Horua, the master of the Marias Great Forest, the demonic monsters fought alongside the Marias tribe and protected them. Moreover, his flames also possessed a mysterious power that ensured that the forest didn't burn down due to carelessness. Nobody on this battlefield had experienced anything like this before. Moreover, Findine was the only one who had fought against a guardian deity before. It was on the day she first met Deus Verdi, while they were trying to cross the Norsweden mountain range. Actually, it would be difficult to even call it a fight. It was more like a single blow from the mountain lord had knocked down Findine, who had dared to strike Deus, who could control souls. It was an enormous power that one could never dream to overcome a majestic figure exuding greatness. At the very least, Findine knew that the Mountain Lord and Horua were of the same kind. But that didn't mean they were equally overwhelming. It's more like a deity incarnate in a human body. Findine glanced over her shoulder towards the center of this battlefield, towards the open field that lay beyond the trees. The great warrior was dominating the battlefield with his flaming spear. And the only one who was engaged in a heated confrontation with him was the Knight Commander, Gloria. No matter how skilled Findine was, interfering in their battle recklessly would be dangerous even for her. Even taking her skills into consideration compared to the both of them, her equipment was somewhat lacking. Gloria, clad in a crimson armor that covered her entire body while wielding a greatsword that was worthy of being called a treasured weapon, faced off against the great warrior Voxer, who was practically naked, but had received protection through the guardian deity's power that was far superior when compared to any armor. Huff! However, even so, if Findine wished to simply remain standing here, she wouldn't have fought for freedom while being oppressed by the Clark Republic. Findine had never knelt down to anyone in her life. Perhaps it was something one would only witness after death. Ghost Lady, are you there? At Findine's call, a wind mixed with mana blew in. While Deus was in the mountainside village, the dark spiritualist stayed by Findine's side to assist her whenever she was in danger. I'm gonna jump in there now. Can you support me? Although she was unable to see the dark spiritualist, their desires were aligned. Findine then checked the protective barrier that was now enveloping her. Being a dark mage, the dark spiritualist had a low proficiency when it came to casting protective magic on others, but it was better than nothing. Seeing this, Findine took a deep breath, gripped her axe tight, and retrieved a club hidden near her waist with her other hand. Swish! Master Bastard! The club extended into a long axe. She took deep breaths and while gripping an axe with each hand, she stepped forward. You should only come out a bit later. She couldn't waste any more time. Even if she couldn't bring the war to an end, at the very least, Deus Verdi should show up only after she managed to rescue Iluania. It was so that he, who always remained calm and composed, wouldn't become like the other dark mages. That was their earnest wish. He'll end this quickly. Through an unexpected partnership, Findine and the dark spiritualist charged towards the great warrior. You fools! Flee now. The great warrior Voxer had now become someone who could no longer be labeled as a mere human. Deities couldn't harm humans as they wished. For those who protected nature, humans were a part of that nature. However, Horua had abandoned his position as a guardian deity. After throwing away his responsibility, he lost his power. However, he still remained formidable against humans as his power was originally immense. Upon hearing the unknown roar, whether it came from Voxer or Horua, the royal army had no choice but to retreat. At that moment, demonic monsters poured in from all directions, and the warriors from the Marias tribe utilized the forest to employ Hitandran tactics, with the great warrior as their center. Unlike the times when they could simply push forward, it was difficult for the heavily armored royal knights to maneuver freely in the dense forest. It was hindering their movement. The retreating royal army had no choice but to withdraw for now to allow them to regroup. It feels like we're not fighting just against the tribal people, but against the entire Marias Great Forest. Gloria discarded her crimson royal knight armor as it had melted due to the flames and high heat and only had bandages covering her body. Even Lucia, who was carefully treating her, sighed heavily. It's not just Voxer who's the problem anymore, is it? Oh, you mean Horua? It does make me wonder if there's really anyone in the Great Forest who can defeat that being. That person said that Horua has abandoned his title as a guardian deity, so hell practically ceased to exist with time. When will that be? Gloria asked bluntly, but of course Lucia didn't have the answer for that. Even Deus Verdi would find it difficult to predict when that immense power would run out. He can freely manipulate fire throughout the forest while making sure it does not burn. Even the Archmage wouldn't be able to pull off such a feat. The biggest problem was Horua's flames. He could spread his flames throughout the forest, shaping the battlefield as he desired, but at the same time it caused no harm to the forest itself. Just a gesture from the great warrior would make the flames that seemed eternal vanish. The fire was aiding the enemy. The situation was infuriating to the point of absurdity. With their limits as humans clearly evident now, Gloria bit her lips, racking her brain, trying to think of their next strategy. The people who had been slaughtered mercilessly were innocent civilians from her country. So, she couldn't simply let them go like this. As Gloria reviewed her fight against the great warrior, she forced down the bitter taste rising in her mouth and asked Lucia, "Come to think of it, what about that person? That person? I mean, the Soul Whisperer's maid." Lucia's complexion darkened momentarily. Gloria had anticipated such a reaction, but she still needed confirmation. Findine was the only person who had come to her aid when Gloria was overwhelmed by Horua's strength. With her distinctive free-spirited movements and equipped with the hand of hemomancy, the maid fought the great warrior tenaciously until the end. Eventually, after both of her axes melted away, Gloria jumped in to save her, before any fatal wounds could be inflicted. "I finished treating her before you. However, she won't be able to participate in the next battle." That's expected, but it's a shame. Although Gloria had seen Findine fight in the palace before, she felt it wouldn't be easy to find a warrior of that caliber. Especially since her movements became faster as the battle continued and her senses as sharp as a beast's. It reached a point where even Gloria felt chills upon witnessing it. At that moment, swish, a man entered the tent through the dampened entrance. His mere presence cooled the heated bodies of everyone present inside, those who were burning fiercely due to Horua's flames. His dampened hair, soaked by the pouring rain, gave off an oddly ominous vibe. And then, Kaya. Knight Commander Gloria shrieked as she hastily covered herself. Having lived only wielding the sword and being the woman who had become the king's strongest sword, apart from what she had read in the novels written by her friend, Lucia, she knew next to nothing about relationships between men and women. Wrapped only in bandages, she hastily covered her body. However, from their first encounter, the Soul Whisperer's gaze remained unchanged. His eyes did not waver. Any other man might have turned away, however. His gaze was fixed firmly on the Saintess. "I have finished sending them off." It was a short yet concise statement. Ignoring the fact that the man before her could see her friend half-naked, Lucia clasped her hands together hearing that statement. "You've worked hard. It is my assistant Owen who has worked hard. I would like to request treatment for him. Please be careful with his fingers in particular." Understood. During the several-day-long sending-off ceremony for the deceased, Owen had continuously played the piano, with only brief breaks in between. He now laid inside the tent in a state of exhaustion. But it seems like the battle is not over yet. Deus was surprised that the war, which he thought would end quickly now that the great warrior was weakened, lasted longer than expected. Gloria hastily covered herself with a blanket and responded with a hint of shame. It's because of that guardian deity, Horua. I had a hard time dealing with him as he fled into the Marias Great Forest. So he escaped in the end. Deus nodded lightly after getting a rough understanding of the situation, and then posed another question. But where is Findine? A momentary silence filled the tent. Witnessing that, Deus immediately furrowed his brows and somewhat issued a command. Take me to her. Now. Damn, you came back so fucking early. Findine greeted me with a hoarse voice as she looked up at me. The tips of her white hair seemed charred, and her entire body was wrapped in bandages. She seemed to have been inflicted with burns, but it seemed that the wounds wouldn't leave any scars on her thanks to Lucia's holy power. However, it looked like she had now exhausted all her energy, as she didn't even have the energy to rise. It's over now. The appearance of the dark spiritualist, who was sitting quietly beside her, was also concerning. Since Horua could even attack the soul, her body looked feeble and blurred, which seemed precarious. Master Bastard, I haven't lost yet. If I go back into the battlefield now, they'll certainly win. That's right. So, you can just sit still and remain here. I stared at the two of them without saying a word before finally speaking up. Why did you two fight until you reached such dire conditions? The two remained silent, refusing to speak. In the face of such explicit silence, I asked them once again. Speak up. Despite that, silence still lingered. When I glanced at the saintess who had followed me, she also lowered her head and remained silent. It felt like a lump had formed inside my chest. The more I saw Findine and the dark spiritualist so enervated, almost like they would collapse at any time, the more I felt like something inside my chest was going on a rampage, threatening to burst out. Such emotions were new to me. Unsure of how to relieve them, I slowly conjured my mana. Should I retrieve one of the deceased and interrogate them? The chilly mana gradually dominated the inside of the medical tent. If they truly wished to remain silent, I would simply step outside the tent and seize a soul for interrogation. However, at that moment, a woman with half her body burnt, entering through the edge of the tent, appeared before my eyes. Her energy seemed to have been drained away, and she looked like she would fade away at any moment. She slowly approached me, not with her usual confident stride, but by crawling towards me. Iluania? Why was her guardian spirit here? And at the same time, the three other women flinched. I felt like my head started to heat up. For the first time, the emotions that I had considered faint before were now starting to sway me. I will no longer repeat my question. So speak up. To understand. Please conceal your mana first. See, the other patients are scared of you. After seeing that my condition was unusual, Saintess Lucia immediately spoke up. Though she explained it with utmost caution, almost as if she was tapping on a stone bridge ultimately, I could only arrive at one conclusion. Hoping that I wouldn't enter the battlefield, the great warrior had kidnapped Iluania. Master Bastard, just stay still for now. They'll take care of this. Findine hurriedly rose from her sick bed to grab my hand, but I brushed it off. Wait, please wait. If you intervene, it will put that person in danger. It was the saintess who blocked my way, but I grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her aside. Deus, uphold your principles. Don't become like Dante, the other dark mages, or me. Although the dark spiritualist spoke tearfully, I ignored her as well and stepped outside. Shwa. Amidst the heavy downpour, I looked up and spoke. Pass this message to Gloria. My voice was so calm that it even surprised me. Until I come out, do not bring the army near the forest. Then, without hesitation, I strode towards the Marias Great Forest in the distance. My pace gradually became faster. With tightly clenched fists, I felt the fluctuations in my emotions start to fade as they touched the principles I held as the Soul Whisperer, not as a dark mage. However, I held no regrets. That forest now belongs to the dead. With that, I headed into the depths of the forest all by. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 139, Broken Principles. Chapter 139, Broken Principles. Quahaha. The great warrior's hearty laughter echoed through the rain in the Marias Great Forest. Despite the pouring rain, the Marias tribe were enjoying their festival, sitting around the blazing fire of a huge horned creature and roasting meat. Even as raindrops continued pouring down, there was no sign of wavering in Horua's towering flames that rose at the center of the village. The Marias tribe gathered around it, grilling meat and enjoying the celebration. Although rainwater was mixed in the food, it was no problem for those who had been living in the deep forest. Turns out Griffin is nothing. Who? The royal knights? Our ancestors are with us. Hail Lord Horua. Hail the great warrior. The Marias tribe raised their drinks, reveling in victory. The great warrior stared at them with a satisfied smile before turning to Shaman Sayong, who was beside him. We have won. Sayong's expression darkened at the great warrior's laughter. It is not victory, it is protection. Have you forgotten our original purpose? The triumphant expression on Voxar's face froze at those words. Sayong urged him as if forcing him to wake up from being intoxicated by a sweet moment of success. It's irreversible now. To survive, we must reclaim a portion of Griffin's land. All right, I know. The war had just begun. However, Voxar was somehow confident. Now, he was no longer a mere human but a being close to divinity. Though he knew nothing would last forever and the flames would eventually extinguish, until the foundation for the tribe's survival was secured, the flame would persist. In order to achieve that, Horua had even abandoned the forest to join the war. Then, a woman rushed in with urgency. Amidst the shared joy, she addressed Voxar and Sayong with a tensed expression. Great warrior, the woman we are keeping hostage has been whining about labor pains. It seems she needs to give birth immediately. He had heard that Iluania, the pregnant hostage, had been experiencing labor pains lately, and wondered if it had really arrived this soon. After a moment's consideration, the great warrior nodded lightly. Proceed. The hostage's life is of utmost importance. Understood. The woman hurriedly turned and ran. Sayong's lips curled into a smirk after he heard the conversation. Well, this is good timing. We have another pawn to use against the Soul Whisperer. Besides, if it's a child, it'll be easier to handle as a hostage. Alright. Honestly, the great warrior knew that kidnapping a pregnant woman and even using her child as hostage wasn't morally right. However, he had already dedicated himself entirely to the Marias tribe and for the Great Forest's survival. That was why it was acceptable. If this fight was for their sake, then it was enough. As he pondered this, Kayak, a chilling scream was heard. Its deep sound pierced through the forest, adding an ominous tone to the heavy rain. However, it didn't end there. Why did he have it? He haven't done anything wrong with did he have it? 1. You can just start from that bastard first Wame. 2. Please save me, 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 save me. 3. Isato Kato Babarid here like these? Missouriria Liake? You're a delaying lady. 4. I heard Theruria Latof demonic minstercent this forest Saforna. 5. Belsarm was crushed ranziabal sword ujout halis legwasevered that haughty wastinly own left alive but my head gets smashed. 6. I told Iauto be careful but I didn't tell Iauto abandon. 7. Each spirit gathered high in the sky and poured out their own stories and grievances, pleading for their deaths. The Marias tribe, in the midst of celebrating their festival, fell into confusion, but the great warrior gritted his teeth with determination and immediately pulled out his spear. Bring the hostage. The Soul Whisperer has arrived. Was it because it was soaked by the pouring rain? The spear he had always carried seemed unusually heavy now. After he decided to touch the Soul Whisperer's reverse scale, this situation wasn't something he expected to happen. But surely, if he let the Soul Whisperer see the pregnant woman in labor, the latter wouldn't be able to act so recklessly. Thinking so, the great warrior commanded Sayong. However, somehow, Shaman Sayong didn't obey his orders, but instead looked up at the sky with a smile filled with contentment. It was as if the appearance of so many souls present at once was a spectacle he had been waiting for. Sayong? Having a bad feeling about this, Voxar called his name. However, Sayong simply trembled with anticipation and shook his head. He is said to be a dark mage, but not that kind of dark mage. What are you talking about? Bring the hostage now. Do you truly believe you can stop this disaster? He wondered what exactly Sayong meant by that. His train of thought regarding this matter wasn't clear, but he sensed that Sayong harbored different intentions. Then, it was now that he realized he had been manipulated by Sayong to some extent. Swish. Voxar brandished his spear threateningly at Sayong's throat. You bastard. What is your purpose? There is something I need to see. Even though the spear grazed his throat and blood trickled down, Sayong seemed unaffected. He just kept staring at the sky. It was a banquet of numerous souls who had departed from this land, each with their own story. He possessed talents chosen by the continent. He obtained the Demon Stone, known as both a blessing and a curse. He even managed to find the most suitable mentor all by himself. His voice grew louder. Now, Voxar saw that Sayong had become a completely different person. Voxar couldn't control his body as he was temporarily overwhelmed by dizziness. Yet each of Sayong's words clearly pierced his ears. But, just because of that one principle that he doesn't want to control the dead. Just because of that foolish principle of respecting them. Just because of that stupid principle he has placed shackles on himself. It was a twisted rage. Sayong clenched his fist, gritted his teeth, and screamed. He failed to properly utilize his inherent power. Can a knight truly be called a knight if they don't use a sword? Can a necromancer be called a necromancer if they don't control souls? That was why he was called the Soul Whisperer. Unlike other necromancers, he didn't view nor use souls as tools. because he wanted to provide them comfort. However, things were now different. Just like someone who had dared to touch the dragon's reverse scale, Voxer had precisely disturbed a part of Deus Verdi that should have never been touched. Alright, he's coming. Sayong's finger pointed through the dense trees. The one who has finally shed the name of Soul Whisperer in order to become a true necromancer is now present. In burning my Bodias burning 8. New please stop letmerst I don't want to fight anymore. 9. This holdn't be happening if we're so hard made contributions this shouldn't be happening 10. Wigarid to diataga Thursaureus delaliv. 11. Come at me, show me that talent of yours. Show me the strength you have to threaten them. The incomprehensible screams of the dead resonated with the sound of cold rain pouring from the sky. At that moment, as everyone's bodies froze with an unknown fear as if the raindrops had frozen them in place, the emotionless voice of a man echoed in everyone's ears. Be quiet. Swish. Horua's massive flames, which had been heating up the festivities at the center of the village, were extinguished. A thick darkness settled in the forest. The souls lingered in the sky, obscuring even the moon and stars. It made the village pitch black. The souls, who had been loudly expressing their grievances, suddenly fell silent and began to writhe. They transformed into white flames, enveloping the entire village of the Marias tribe like a prison. This is Deus Verdi, who now wields souls as if they were tools. On top of that, with all his might, Deus Verdi, the king of the dead. Another individual striving for the pinnacle of necromancy. Suddenly, a black robe enveloped Sayong's body. Voxer didn't know what it meant. However, Dante's symbol was embroidered on Sayong's robe. Alright, great warrior. I have given you the power you desired. I persuaded Horua, brought nobles from the kingdom, and laid the foundation for the future. I presented to you the path to salvation for the Marias Great Forest, which is gradually turning into a desert. You bastard. Now go and fight. Stop that man who is walking on the path to becoming the king of the dead. That is the price you, who have gained power, must pay me. The Sahar Desert was adjacent to the Marias Great Forest. It was known to people that the Marias Great Forest had blocked the Sahar Desert's expansion. However, the residents of the Marias Great Forest and Horua were aware that the desert known as the Cursed Land would eventually encroach upon and consume the Great Forest as well. It was a dire situation where their homeland would vanish if they took no action. At that moment, Shaman Sayong proposed a solution. The great warrior placed his full trust in Sayong's ideas, given the latter's status as a member of the Marias tribe. Hence, now he gritted his teeth in rage. Turns out you have betrayed us. Yes, that's right. I found people who will awaken my talents more than this place. And they wanted to see the end of that man. It was the price to enter Dante. It was at this moment that those who sought to confirm the true might of the Soul Whisperer were now closely observing the power of Deus Verdi through his vision. His opponent was a guardian deity of flames who had abandoned its home and descended upon humanity. If anything, it was a higher price to pay than expected. It was most definitely not an easy task. If we remain like this, the entire Marias tribe will perish. Won't you protect them? Voxer was about to thrust his spear at Sayong's throat, but the latter suddenly disappeared, only to reappear on the roof of a nearby cabin moments later. Bastard. I will make sure to kill you later. You seem quite relaxed. Huh? Voxer gritted his teeth and was about to follow Sayong with determination. However, at that moment, Kai-ak, with a scream filled with agony, the souls enveloped in white flames plummeted like meteorites, striking Sayong's body with precision. Cough. He had no option but to endure a heavy blow while coughing up blood. Kai-ak. Stop. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Thud. 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 Some of the souls hovering in the sky continued to fall on Sayong. The cabin he had been on was already half collapsed, and within its wreckage, Sayong lay writhing on the ground, coughing up blood. Gorark. Not only that, but the flames of souls were also clinging to his hands and feet, inflicting him with agonizing pain. Even Voxer couldn't help but shudder at the brutality. However, suddenly, Sayong's burning body floated away. It was carried by unseen forces and flying towards the entrance of the village. Amidst the dense trees, the man finally revealed himself. However, his appearance was completely different from what the great warrior remembered. Tired eyes. His long hair, soaked by the rain, clung to his face, and evil spirits clung to his entire body, spewing out their resentments. Deus caught Sayong as he flew towards him, slamming him to the ground. Then he grabbed his hair and dragged him along. Kayak. Deus whispered softly as he looked down at Sayong's burning robe. Dante's spy. Cough. Quo. Although Sayong's limbs were burning, he didn't die. Was this also a kind of necromancy? The great warrior was momentarily seized by indescribable fear after realizing some kind of truth. Even death may not be my end. Deus completely ignored the great warrior's reaction, looking down at Siong instead and talking to him. Look closely at who you have turned into your enemy. Deus issued a warning, knowing that all members of Dante were witnessing this spectacle through Siong's eyes. With Horua's wings spread wide, Voxer flew in front of Deus, who was exuding an ominous energy from his demeanor. He had to inform him that this situation itself was a trap. Deus Verdi, listen to me. This is all a trap. It was orchestrated by that man. This war was planned to make you and me fight. The hostage is safe. We are even helping the woman in lab. Before he could even finish speaking, Deus' eyes were already fixed on the cabin where the hostages were held. Numerous souls had surrounded the cabin, blocking anyone from entering. What a monster! Even the guardian deity, Horua, couldn't help but acknowledge him. Voxer suddenly wondered why Horua, the guardian deity, didn't recognize Deus entering the forest. However, I forgot. He's no longer a guardian deity now. Horua had already forsaken his role as the forest's guardian in order to protect it. Now, even if he was with Horua, he wouldn't be able to perceive everything that happened inside the forest. We, too, were merely fighting for survival. We were also helpless in the face of the calamity called the desert. Upon meeting Deus' gaze, Voxer could only stop in the middle of his speech. It was a futile attempt. The man in front of him wasn't listening at all. No matter what he tried to say here, he would never receive any mercy from him. Voxer gripped his spear tightly, glaring at Deus as he unleashed Horua's flames. Yes, this was war. Thinking that, Voxer glared at the enemy before him. However, on the contrary, Deus looked past Voxer and at the trembling villagers. All of you will die. He said it resolutely, almost like making some kind of oath. However, that death will not be the end you imagine it to be. He had abandoned his identity as the Soul Whisperer. In the eyes of Deus, who had now truly become a necromancer in the sense of the word, there was only a thick layer of murderous. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys. Chapter 140. Savior. Chapter 140. Savior. Though I wasn't sure what it was, I strongly felt something inside me break. Was that why? The resistance I always felt when it came to controlling souls was now completely gone. Kayak, stop. Ak, was that why? Even amidst the pitiful screams of souls being swept away and suffering under my magic, I felt nothing. Was that why? Even when facing the great warrior and Horua, whom even Gloria, the Knight Commander, and Findine, the leader of the Scrapyard Nomads, couldn't defeat, I managed to gain the upper hand. Bang, 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 bang. Each of the souls continuously pouring out was akin to an ultimate blow delivered by putting everything on the line. The Marias Great Forest was a vast jungle with a rich past, steeped in history and tradition. Consequently, it was inevitable that there would be many unfortunate casualties. As a result, it felt as though I had a nearly unlimited supply of bullets in my hands. The great warrior staggered. He desperately emitted flames from his body to protect himself. Even if the souls were infused with my mana and the power of Lemegeton, they were unable to stick to the flames of Horua, who was known as the deity of the forest, easily. Therefore, swish, I changed the direction of my hand. And beyond it, past the great warrior, were the trembling members of the Marias tribe. Men and women, the elderly and the children. I shot arrows of remorseful souls towards the fairly diverse group of tribal people gathered there. Kayak, please save us. Great warrior. The tribal people screamed in terror. Startled, Voxer hurriedly gathered his flames and threw himself towards his tribe. After blocking the souls flying towards them with his body, he let out a faint breath, quickly regaining a steady stance, and glared at me. His eyes held various emotions, but he didn't voice them out. It seemed like he felt a type of aversion towards me. Honestly speaking, if it were the me from before, I would never have taken such drastic actions. However, even when I closed my eyes for a brief moment, the face of the kidnapped Iluania came to mind. When I opened my eyes again, I could see Findine, who had been injured, looking up at me. And when I closed my eyes again, it felt as though I could hear the dark spiritualist's voice, filled with concern even though she herself was in a pitiful state. And every time I recalled all of these women, the actions my hand took grew fiercer. Necromancers were basically proficient in using offensive magic. They manipulated souls and showcased a variety of irregularities through their mana that would generally be impossible for other mages to achieve. If one were to point out the biggest weakness of such necromancers, it would be souls. To control souls, they first had to discover them. However, finding those souls wasn't an easy task. While some individuals were gifted with spiritual eyes and could see souls to a certain extent, they were unable to see all souls. Most could only see evil spirits with grudges deep enough to be able to materialize themselves to some extent. That is right. I am not like them. What may have been a weakness or a limitation for ordinary necromancers posed no problem for me. With Lemegeton capable of awakening the dead, and eyes that could see them all, I could surpass the supposed limitations of a necromancer. I stretched my hand upward. The scattered souls began to condense in my palm, and soon, I forcibly contorted them into the shape of a great sword. The soul greatsword gradually enlarged, reaching a size capable of engulfing not only Voxer but the countless tribal people behind him as well. Upon realizing the imminent danger if he couldn't stop this, Voxar's eyes widened. Determined to meddle in the process, he gripped his spear and rushed towards me. Shrill. He then whistled. As if waiting for his call, numerous demonic monsters burst out of the bushes in response to the whistle. They were loyal demonic monsters who had never forgotten who the master of the forest was, and they came to the aid of the great warrior, who had now merged with Horua. However, crack, crack, transparent beings in the shape of demonic monsters emerged from the ground while simultaneously tearing the throats of the charging demonic monsters. As I had demonstrated before, when facing Dina, souls weren't exclusive to humans. The souls of demonic monsters were so plentiful here that they seemed to overflow, and it wasn't difficult to control them by inflicting pain. Ironically, the charging demonic monsters would end up dead in my hands, and their souls would then rush towards Voxer instead. Despite trying to fend them off with his spear, Voxer was unable to completely overcome their sheer numbers and ended up getting bitten on his shoulder and thigh. However, the wings of flames hadn't ceased yet, bringing him in front of me. And just as the long spear, aiming for my heart, was about to strike again, crack, a massive mouth appeared and blocked the spear. It was a woman with a huge mouth around the region of her chest, with both her hands shaped like the mouths of demonic monsters emitting a chilling, gritting teeth sound. The shaman affiliated with Dante, whose limbs were severed, revealed her identity as he observed the scene from behind. Dina. It was Dina, the Dante-affiliated monstromancer I had killed for the first time. Since her soul was still in my possession, I could forcibly control her. Of course, even she would not be able to block the spear of flames completely. She could only stall for a moment. I lowered my hand holding the greatsword as I watched her soul gradually wither away indifferently. At the same time, the great warrior Voxer hurriedly spread his wings and soared upwards. Clang. Q. With his thin spear, Voxer blocked the soul greatsword that was about to sweep through the entire tribe. He let out a strained groan as blood vessels popped up all over his body, his face turning red. Huawek. His belief in protecting the tribesmen was truly tragic to witness. However, it unfolded as expected. As taught by the dark spiritualist, one of the fundamental principles of necromancy was that since necromancers controlled souls, one must not judge all aspects of the magic cast merely by appearance. For example, even though it resembled a greatsword, it was actually a flock of souls gathered into one shape. As the shape of the greatsword began to crumble, the souls forming it started pouring out, creeping through the spear, and rushed towards the great warrior. It was like watching a swarm of bugs. Argh. The great warrior let out a grotesque scream and dropped his spear before crashing to the ground. Despite the dull thud, the souls continued pouring towards the great warrior following my forceful command. The souls repeatedly entered and exited through all sorts of orifices in his body like his eyes, nose, and ears. I moved at the same pace as when I arrived and stood before Voxer, who was writhing in agony. I coated my hand with mana, and then plunged it directly into the region near his heart. Stab. Voxer was muscular, likely from rigorous training. However, as I had never attempted it before, stabbing his strengthened body with my bare hand proved to be quite challenging. To be precise, my goal was to tear apart whatever was radiating intense heat from the region near his heart. Quack. The pouring rain naturally washed away the blood he vomited. The radiant object, resembling a sun, that was now in my grasp was none other than the guardian deity, Horua. Crush. I slammed Horua, who was about to say something, straight to the ground. I then summoned the souls of the demonic monsters. They began tearing apart the guardian deity, who was rolling on the ground while letting out cries reminiscent of beasts. Hawk, hawk, hawk. Similarly, Voxer lay on the ground, gasping for air, his eyes filled solely with fear. Slowly, he opened his trembling lips. Please let the tribesmen go, they are Inek. Crush. He could no longer continue speaking as I used my mana to shatter his head with precision, leaving only grotesque remnants behind. And that was how he died, though it was quite mysterious as to how he could still speak even after being stabbed through the heart. Grab. I stretched out my hand into the air to grasp something. It was Voxar's soul. While his appearance remained intact, his eyes were now filled with unparalleled horror. Even in death you will not find eternal rest. Realizing that even after death, he would not be able to escape, he began to tremble and pleaded with me. However, since I didn't even want to hear his voice, I restrained his entire body with chains of mana extending from my palm. The torment wasn't over yet. Look at them. Voxar's eyes widened as I pointed towards the Marias tribe, who were kneeling and begging before me with tears streaming down their faces. They too shall meet their ends here. The great warrior pleaded and writhed desperately, hoping to change my mind regarding my declaration. However, I no longer had any hesitation. As he had risked it all under his name as the great warrior, slaughtering countless people of the kingdom, he had to pay the price. Therefore, I hope that you won't become a monster in the process of defeating those monsters. And indeed I too, Master Bastard, just stay still for now. They'll take care of this. Had become the same as those monsters. Deus, uphold your principles. Don't become like Dante, the other dark mages, or me. I would kill them all. It's dark tonight. All of a sudden I heard a voice, and even though it had been a while since I last heard it, my eyes trembled at the familiar voice. I glanced around unconsciously, but naturally, I found nothing. Is there a waning moon tonight? Because the voice came from within me. I wanted to hear that voice again, but she didn't speak further. Did I wake her up? Accompanied by a chilling sensation down my spine, doubt began to creep in. However, it wasn't enough to cause me to put a stop to my actions. All it did was make me hesitate for a moment. A brief moment that awakened my dulled senses. However, because of it, I could finally hear the resounding cries I had missed. I turned my gaze. At the end of my gaze was a woman holding a tiny baby swaddled tightly in a blanket. Hoping the cold rain wouldn't touch her, Iluania held the baby close to her and then, she looked at me with an exhausted face. Sploosh. I stepped on the puddled ground. I unconsciously headed in the opposite direction of the trembling tribal people, towards the baby. Resounding cries. The birth of new life. Iluania carefully handed her baby to me as I drew closer to her, smiling in spite of her exhaustion. It's a girl. Warmth spread through my palm and spread throughout my body. She wasn't my child, but I had chosen to take responsibility for her, the living being entrusted to me by Deus Verdi, at the cost of giving up his own body. Would you like to name the child? With trembling hands, I carefully held the child. You may not be my own flesh and blood, but I will be your family. I slowly averted my gaze. I still felt the simmering anger within me as I stared at them, who were looking at me with fearful gazes. However, I chose to gently stroke the child's forehead with my hand. Strangely enough, the crying child suddenly fell silent and stared at me blankly. You have saved many lives. I did not want to taint your birth with blood, screams, and slaughter, and since I did not want to ruin your first meeting with the world. Savior, you have already saved many lives just by being born. I am sure you will become a great person in the future. Sevia, that is your name. As if understanding my words, the child giggled. And just then the rain began to ease. Please donate through Audiobook Novels PayPal to help me keep uploading for you guys.